Have you ever looked into a mirror and felt something staring back? Not your reflection, not your face, but something else. Something that knows you better than you know yourself. My name is the narrator from Whispers in the Dark, and tonight I'm going to tell you a story that might make you cover every mirror in your house. This is the story of Sarah, a woman who found a mirror that never lied, and what it showed her changed her forever. So, turn off the lights, lie down, and listen. But don't look behind you. Sarah was an ordinary woman, 32 years old, living in a small apartment in a quiet town called Ashwood. She wasn't rich, wasn't famous, just normal. She worked a dull job at a local library, stacking books and helping patrons find novels they'd never read. But Sarah had a secret. She was haunted by guilt, a weight that clung to her every step. Years ago, she'd done something she could never forgive herself for. It was a night she replayed in her dreams, a memory that lingered like damp fog. She never spoke of it, not to her friends, not to her sister Emily, but it followed her like a shadow. One rainy evening, while walking home from the library, Sarah passed by an old antique shop she'd never noticed before. Its windows were foggy, the sign above the door barely readable, faded letters spelling curiosities of the past. Something pulled her inside, like an invisible thread tugging at her soul. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the shelves were cluttered with strange objects, cracked porcelain dolls with hollow eyes, rusted pocket watches that ticked backward, and books with no titles, their pages yellowed and brittle. But what caught her eye was a mirror. It wasn't large, maybe 3 feet tall, with an ornate wooden frame carved with twisting vines and faces that seemed to shift when you weren't looking. The glass was old, slightly cloudy, but it had a strange pull, like it was calling her name. The shopkeeper, an old man with eyes like bottomless pits, shuffled toward her. His voice was a rasp as he said, "This mirror never lies, young lady. It shows you who you really are." Sarah laughed nervously, thinking it was just a sales pitch. She bought the mirror for $20, a steal, and took it home, unaware of the nightmare she just invited. That night, she hung the mirror in her bedroom, opposite her bed. She stood in front of it, brushing her hair, when she noticed something odd. Her reflection. It wasn't quite right. The Sarah in the mirror was smiling, but she wasn't. Her reflection's eyes were darker, sharper, like they were studying her. She blinked, and the reflection blinked too. But a split second later, she rubbed her eyes, telling herself it was just fatigue, but a chill ran down her spine. Over the next few days, Sarah became obsessed with the mirror. Every time she looked into it, her reflection seemed different. Sometimes it moved when she didn't, tilting its head or raising a hand she hadn't raised. Sometimes it held objects she wasn't holding, a rusty knife, a faded photograph of a stranger, a lock of hair tied with a black ribbon. She started avoiding mirrors in other rooms, but this one, she couldn't stay away. Then, one night, it spoke. "Why do you keep lying, Sarah?" it whispered, its voice like a hiss in her ear. She stumbled back, her heart pounding. But the room was empty, just her and the mirror. Night after night, the mirror showed her things, memories she'd buried, faces she'd tried to forget. The accident, 10 years ago. Sarah had been driving home from a party. She'd had one too many drinks, her vision swimming. She didn't see the man crossing the street until it was too late. A sickening thud, a flash of headlights on wet pavement, and then silence. She didn't stop, didn't call for help. She just drove away, leaving him there, alone in the rain. She told herself it wasn't her fault, that he was probably fine. But deep down, she knew. The guilt gnawed at her. A silent scream she couldn't silence. The mirror knew too. It showed her the man's face, his eyes wide with fear, his hands reaching out as life faded from him. It showed her the life she'd taken, the family he'd left behind, a wife who cried herself to sleep, a daughter who stopped smiling, a son who grew up without a father. "You can't hide from me," the reflection said. "I am you." Sarah tried to cover the mirror with a blanket, but the voice didn't stop. She tried to smash it with a hammer, but the glass wouldn't break, the hammer bouncing off like it hit steel. She even moved it to the attic, locking the door behind her, but every night she'd wake up to find it back in her room, staring at her, its reflection waiting. One night, Sarah called her sister Emily in a panic. "There's something wrong with this mirror," she said, her voice trembling. Emily, a skeptic, came over the next day. She stood in front of it, laughing at first, but then her smile faded. "Sarah, your reflection isn't moving." Emily reached out to touch the glass, and the reflection grabbed her wrist. Emily screamed, pulling back, a red mark forming on her skin. "Get rid of it," she yelled. But Sarah didn't know how. That night, Emily didn't go home. She stayed, watching the mirror. And by morning, she was gone. The mirror showed Sarah an image of Emily, trapped inside, banging on the glass. Her eyes pleading Sarah couldn't take it anymore. One night, she stood in front of the mirror, screaming, "What do you want from me?" The reflection didn't answer. Instead, it stepped out, a perfect copy of Sarah, but wrong. Its skin was too pale, its eyes too dark, its smile too wide, revealing teeth that weren't hers. It grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the mirror. Sarah tried to fight, but it was like fighting herself. The room spun, the air grew cold, and then darkness. When Sarah woke up, she was inside the mirror. She could see her bedroom, but it was blurry, like looking through water. Outside, her reflection, her other self, was living her life. It went to her job, smiled at her co-workers, laughed with her friends, ate her food, but Sarah was trapped, banging on the glass, screaming, but no one could hear her. She saw her reflection open her mail, pay her bills, even date a man she'd never met. It was living her life, but twisting it, making it darker. Days turned into weeks. Sarah watched as her reflection grew crueler, colder, like it was feeding on her guilt. It whispered to her through the glass, "This is who you really are, Sarah. This is what you deserve." It started small, ignoring calls from Emily's husband, leaving rude notes for the neighbors. But then it escalated. It quit Sarah's job, sold her car, and one night it brought home a stranger, laughing as if it were a game. Sarah's life was unraveling, and she was powerless. One night, Sarah noticed something. The reflection was getting weaker, its movement slower, its voice quieter. She realized the mirror wasn't just showing her guilt, it was feeding on it. The more she hated herself, the stronger it became. She remembered Emily's words. Fight it. So she did the only thing she could. She stopped fighting her guilt. She sat in the darkness of the mirror and faced her past. She whispered, "I'm sorry." Not to the reflection, but to the man she'd hurt, to his family, to Emily, to herself. She let the tears fall, letting the weight lift for the first time in years. The mirror began to crack. The reflection screamed, clawing at the glass, its face twisting in rage, but it couldn't hold on. With one final apology, Sarah closed her eyes, and the mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces. The sound echoed through the room, a sharp, piercing cry that faded into silence. When she opened her eyes, she was back in her bedroom. The mirror was gone. Nothing but a pile of broken glass on the floor. Sarah was free, but she wasn't the same. She went to the police the next day and confessed everything: the accident, the guilt, even Emily's disappearance, though she couldn't explain it. The police found Emily days later, dazed but alive, wandering near the antique shop, claiming she'd been somewhere dark. Sarah faced the consequences: jail time, public shame. But for the first time in years, she could sleep without nightmares. But sometimes, late at night, she'd hear a whisper in the dark, a faint voice, like her own, saying, "I'm still here." And that's the story of Sarah, and the mirror that never lied. What would you see if you looked into a mirror that showed your true self, your deepest secrets, your darkest fears? Maybe it's better not to know. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to Whispers in the Dark for more tales that will keep you up at night. Leave a comment with your thoughts and tell me, have you ever seen something strange in a mirror? Sleep well, if you can.